The storm had swallowed the entire coastline when the little girl appeared barefoot, shivering and running like something behind her wanted her dead. Cars rushed past. Thunder cracked. No one stopped. No one except the wrong person. A black SUV slowed beside her. Windows tinted, engine too quiet. The kind of vehicle you only see in stories that end badly. She didn't look at it. She kept running until a woman's scream exploded from the cliffs below. The sound cut through the rain like a knife. The girl stopped, turned, and her heart dropped down by the crashing waves. A car had skidded through the guardrail and plunged into the ocean with a woman still trapped inside. People gathered, shocked, frozen, filming with their phones instead of helping. But the little girl, the runaway, didn't hesitate. She dropped her backpack, stepped onto the slippery rocks, and dove straight into the black water without a second of fear. 9 minutes. That's how long she was underwater. 9 minutes before the crowd screamed, and a pair of small hands dragged the unconscious woman back to shore. Nobody knew who the girl was. Nobody knew where she came from. But within an hour, every crime family in the city would know her name. Because the woman she'd saved was the wife of the most feared mafia boss in the entire East Coast. And by sunset, that little runaway would become part of his family forever. Stay with me until the end, because what happened in those 9 underwater minutes turned a terrified child into the most unexpected hero the Mafia had ever seen. The girl's name was Sophia. 11 years old, 4 feet 7 inches tall, weighing maybe 80 pounds, soaking wet, which she was, standing on those jagged rocks, salt water streaming from her tangled brown hair. She had been running for 3 days straight. 3 days since she escaped from the Hillcrest Children's Home after Mr. Harrison tried to put his hands where they didn't belong. 3 days of sleeping in bus station bathrooms and eating scraps from garbage cans behind fast food restaurants. Her thin jacket clung to her shaking body like a second skin. Her sneakers were falling apart, held together with duct tape she'd stolen from a hardware store. Everything she owned was crammed into that weathered backpack, now lying forgotten on the rocks above. But none of that mattered when she heard that scream. The luxury sedan had hydroplaned on the rain-soaked highway. Sophia watched it happen in slow motion. The expensive car spinning like a toy, smashing through the metal barrier, tumbling down the rocky slope, and plunging hood first into the churning gray ocean. The driver's door was already underwater. The passenger side tilted toward the sky at a crazy angle. Through the rear window, Sophia could see movement. Someone was alive in there. Someone was drowning above her. Maybe 20 people had gathered along the guardrail. They pointed. They shouted. They held up their phones to record the disaster. But nobody moved to help. Someone called 911. A man yelled. The fire department's 20 minutes away, another voice replied. She'll be dead by then, said a woman in a red raincoat. Sophia didn't wait to hear more. She kicked off her broken sneakers and dove. The ocean hit her like a frozen fist. The salt burned her eyes. The current tried to drag her sideways against the rocks, but Sophia had learned to swim in the city pool before her mom died, before the foster homes, before everything went wrong. She kicked hard, fighting the waves, swimming toward the sinking car. The sedan was going down fast. Water poured through the cracked windshield. The engine compartment was already completely submerged. Sophia could see the woman inside, trapped by her seat belt, pounding weakly against the passenger window. The woman had long black hair and was wearing a white blouse that billowed around her in the rising water. Her mouth was pressed against the roof of the car, gasping for the last pocket of air. Sophia reached the vehicle just as it slipped another foot deeper. She grabbed the door handle and pulled. Locked. She swam to the passenger window and pounded on the glass with her small fists. The woman's eyes met hers through the water-streaked window. They were dark brown, wide with terror, but also something else. Recognition. Sophia took the biggest breath of her life and dove under the car. The water was darker here, colder. Her lungs already burned. She felt along the bottom of the vehicle until she found a jagged piece of metal from the crash. A sharp fragment of the bumper that had torn loose when the car hit the rocks. She grabbed it and swam back to the passenger window. The woman was unconscious now. Her body floated limply in the water that had filled the car almost completely. Maybe 30 seconds of air left in the very top corner of the roof. Sophia raised the metal fragment and struck the window as hard as she could. Nothing. Again, a spiderweb of cracks appeared. Her chest felt like it was going to explode. Spots danced in front of her eyes. She needed air. She needed to surface, but if she did, the woman would die. Sophia hit the window a third time. The glass shattered inward. Water rushed into the car. But Sophia was already inside, fighting against the current, grabbing the woman around the waist. The seat belt was still fastened. Sophia's fingers fumbled with the metal buckle. It was stuck. Her vision started to fade. Her body screamed for oxygen. This was taking too long. They were both going to drown. Then the buckle clicked open. Sophia wrapped her thin arms around the unconscious woman and kicked toward the surface. But the woman was heavy, much heavier than Sophia expected, and they were deeper now. The car had continued sinking while Sophia worked to free her. 15 feet to the surface. Then 20. Sophia's legs cramped. Her arms felt like lead. The woman's dead weight dragged them both down. This was impossible. An 11-year-old girl couldn't save a grown woman from a sinking car. The physics didn't work. The strength wasn't there. But Sophia kept kicking anyway. Her head broke the surface just as her body gave out completely. She gasped, choked, went under again. The waves threw both of them against the rocks. Sophia's shoulders scraped against the barnacles, leaving a trail of blood in the water. Somehow, she found the strength to grab a piece of seaweed-covered stone. Then another. Hand over hand, she dragged herself and the woman toward the narrow strip of beach below the cliffs. People were shouting from above. Someone had climbed down and was running toward them through the surf, but Sophia barely heard any of it. She pulled the woman onto the wet sand and immediately started pushing on her chest the way she'd seen on television. Water poured from the woman's mouth. Her lips were blue. Her skin was cold as ice. "Come on," Sophia whispered, pressing harder. "Come on." Sophia tilted the woman's head back, pinched her nose, and breathed into her mouth. Then back to chest compressions. "Breathe." The woman's body jerked. She coughed violently, expelling more cedar. Her eyes fluttered open. "You're okay," Sophia said, her own voice from swallowing salt water. "You're going to be okay." The woman stared up at her with those dark brown eyes. She tried to speak, but could only whisper. "Who are you?" "Nobody," Sophia said, already looking around for her backpack. She needed to disappear before the police arrived, before the questions started, before they sent her back to another group home. But as she turned to leave, the woman's hand caught her wrist. "Wait," the woman said, stronger now. "Please, what's your name?" Sophia hesitated. She'd been using fake names for 3 days. Jennifer, Sarah, Amy, whatever seemed safe in the moment. But something in the woman's eyes made her tell the truth. "Sophia," she said quietly. "My name is Sophia." The woman smiled despite her chattering teeth. "I'm Valentina Benedetti, and you just saved my life." Sophia didn't know it yet, but that name would change everything because Valentina Benedetti wasn't just any woman. She was the beloved wife of Marco Benedetti, the head of the most powerful crime family on the East Coast. A man who would kill anyone who threatened his wife. A man who would do anything for someone who saved her. And right now, paramedics were loading Valentina into an ambulance while Sophia tried to slip away unnoticed into the crowd. But Marco Benedetti's men had already spotted her. They'd been watching from that black SUV since the moment she jumped into the water. The black SUV's engine hummed quietly as Sophia tried to disappear into the chaos. Paramedics shouted orders. Police cars arrived with flashing lights. News vans pulled up along the highway above. But the 3 men in expensive suits who stepped out of that SUV weren't watching the ambulance. They were watching her. Sophia grabbed her soggy backpack and started walking away from the beach, her bare feet slipping on the wet rocks. She kept her head down, trying to blend in with the crowd of onlookers. Just another curious kid who'd wandered down to see the accident. "Excuse me, little girl." The voice was deep, calm, and carried an accent that sounded like it came from old movies about New York. Sophia's blood turned to ice. She didn't turn around. She walked faster. "Hey kid, we just want to talk." Heavy footsteps crunched on the gravel behind her. Sophia broke into a run, scrambling up the rocky slope toward the highway. Her wet clothes weighed her down. Her muscles were exhausted from the rescue, but fear gave her speed. She made it halfway up the cliff before a gentle hand touched her shoulder. "Easy there, little hero. Nobody's going to hurt you." Sophia spun around, ready to bite, scratch, or kick if she had to. Instead, She found herself looking up at a man who seemed to take up half the sky. He was maybe 50 years old, with silver hair, slicked back, and kind eyes that didn't match his intimidating size. "My name's Sal," he said, crouching down to her level. "Salvatore Carbone. I work for Mrs. Benedetti's husband. The lady you just saved. She's my boss's wife." Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd heard whispers about families like the Benedettis. The kind of people who made problems disappear, the kind who didn't forget debts, good or bad. "I didn't do anything," she whispered. Sal smiled. It wasn't a scary smile. It was the kind her grandfather might have given her, if she'd ever had a grandfather. "Kid, you just jumped into the ocean during a storm to save a woman you'd never met. That's not nothing. That's everything." Behind Sal, the other two men waited by their SUV. They looked like bodyguards from movies. Dark sunglasses despite the cloudy sky. Hands folded in front of them, patient as statues. "What do you want?" Sophia asked. "Benedetti wants to meet you. To thank you properly." Sophia shook her head. "I can't. I have to go." The question hung in the air like a challenge. Where could an 11-year-old runaway go? What home was waiting for her? What family would welcome her back? Sophia's silence was answer enough. "Look," Sal said, pulling a thick envelope from his jacket. "Benedetti asked me to give you this. For what you did today." Sophia stared at the envelope. It was stuffed with money. More money than she'd ever seen in her life. Enough to buy food for months. Maybe even enough for a bus ticket to somewhere far away where nobody knew her name. But taking money from these people felt dangerous, like stepping into quicksand. "I don't want it," she said. Sal's eyebrows went up. "You don't want it. I just helped someone. That's what you're supposed to do." For a long moment, Sal studied her face. Then he stood up and tucked the envelope back into his jacket. "You know what, kid? I think Mr. Benedetti is going to like you very much." Before Sophia could ask what that meant, Sal was walking back toward the SUV. Over his shoulder, he called, "Marco Benedetti doesn't forget his debts, and right now, he owes you the biggest debt of his life." The three men climbed back into their vehicle and drove away, leaving Sophia standing alone on the rocky slope with questions spinning in her head. She didn't know that at that very moment, Marco Benedetti was pacing the waiting room of St. Anthony's Hospital like a caged tiger. She didn't know that his wife had whispered Sophia's name to him through oxygen tubes and 4 lines. She didn't know that he'd already sent his best men to find out everything there was to know about the little girl who'd risked her life for Valentina. What Sophia did know was that she was cold, hungry, and more alone than ever. She climbed the rest of the way to the highway and started walking. The rain had stopped, but dark clouds still covered the sky. Cars splashed through puddles as they passed, soaking her legs with dirty water. After an hour of walking, Sophia's strength gave out. She found a bus stop with a small covered bench and collapsed onto it, shivering. Her backpack was still damp. Her clothes clung to her skin. Her stomach cramped with hunger. She closed her eyes and tried to figure out her next move. Maybe she could hitchhike to the next town, find a truck driver who looked safe, or sneak onto a freight train like kids did in old movies. The sound of an approaching engine made her look up. Another black SUV was pulling into the bus stop, the same one from before. Sophia jumped to her feet, ready to run again. But this time, the passenger door opened and Valentina Benedetti stepped out. She looked different than she had on the beach. Her black hair was dry now, pulled back in an elegant bun. She wore a long black coat over dark jeans and expensive-looking boots. But her face was still pale, and she moved carefully like someone who'd been through an ordeal. "Hello, Sophia," Valentina said softly. Sophia backed away until she hit the bus stop sign. "How did you find me?" "My husband's men are very good at finding people." Valentina took a step closer, "But I didn't come here to scare you. I came to say thank you." "Already said thank you." "Not properly." Valentina reached into her purse and pulled out a small box wrapped in silver paper. "This was my grandmother's. She gave it to me when I was about your age, and I've been waiting for the right person to pass it on to." Sophia stared at the box, but didn't take it. "I can't accept presents from strangers." Valentina smiled. "We're not strangers anymore. You saved my life. In my family, that makes us connected forever. Your family, the Benedetti family." Valentina's voice carried a weight that Sophia didn't fully understand. "We take care of people who take care of us. And you, brave little Sophia, took better care of me than anyone ever has." Sophia looked past Valentina to the SUV. Through the tinted windows, she could see the silhouettes of the men inside, waiting, watching, ready for whatever Valentina decided. I don't want to be part of any family, Sophia said. Families hurt you. They let you down. They send you away when you become inconvenient. Valentina's expression softened. Not this family. You don't know me. You don't know what I've done. The places I've been. You're right. I don't know your story yet. Valentina held out the silver box again. But I know your heart. I know what you're made of, and that's enough. Sophia's hands shook as she reached for the gift. The box was heavier than it looked. Inside, nestled in black velvet, was a necklace, a small golden pendant shaped like a lighthouse with a tiny diamond at the top. My grandmother told me that lighthouses guide ships safely to shore, Valentina said. Even in the worst storms, even when everything seems lost. She paused, watching Sophia's reaction. That's what you did for me today. Sophia touched the pendant with one finger. It was the most beautiful thing she'd ever held. There's something else, Valentina said. My husband would like to meet you to thank you properly. Will you come with me? Sophia looked up from the necklace. What if I say no? Then Sal will drive you wherever you want to go. No questions asked. And if I say yes, Valentina smiled. Then you'll have the best meal of your life, a warm bed to sleep in, and a family that will never ever let you down. Sophia clutched the lighthouse pendant in her small fist. For the first time in 3 days, she wasn't cold anymore. Sophia climbed into the SUV, clutching the lighthouse necklace like a lifeline. The leather seats were warm and soft, nothing like the hard plastic chairs in group homes, or the cold concrete she'd been sleeping on for days. Valentina sat beside her while Sal drove through the city streets. They passed neighborhoods Sophia had never seen before, where the houses got bigger and the lawns got greener with every mile. Where are we going? Sophia asked quietly. Home, Valentina said simply. The Benedetti estate sat behind tall iron gates that opened automatically as they approached. Sophia pressed her face to the window, staring at gardens that looked like something from fairy tales, fountains, stone statues, trees older than anything she'd ever seen. The house itself was enormous. 3 stories of cream-colored stone with columns like a museum. Lights glowed warmly and dozens of windows. It was the kind of place Sophia had only seen in movies about rich people. This is where you live, she whispered. Valentina nodded. Marco and I don't have children of our own. It gets quiet sometimes. The SUV stopped in front of massive wooden doors. Sal got out first, scanning the area like he expected trouble. Then he opened Valentina's door, then Sophia's. Welcome to the Benedetti family home, he said with a slight bow. Sophia stepped onto marble steps that probably cost more than most people's cars. Her bare feet looked tiny against the polished stone. Her torn jeans and faded t-shirt felt even more raggedy in this setting. The front doors opened before they reached them. A woman in a black dress with gray hair pulled into a tight bun smiled at Valentina. Benedetti, thank God you're safe. We've been so worried. I'm fine, Rosa. Thanks to this brave young lady. Valentina placed her hand on Sophia's shoulder. Sophia, this is Rosa. She's been taking care of this house longer than I've been alive. Rosa's eyes widened as she looked down at Sophia. This is the child who saved you. This is her. Rosa knelt down to Sophia's level, her stern expression melting into something warm. Then you are a hero, little one. And heroes are always welcome in this house. They stepped into a foyer that made Sophia's jaw drop. Crystal chandeliers hung from a ceiling painted with angels and clouds. A curved staircase swept upward like something from a princess movie. Paintings in golden frames covered the walls. Benedetti is waiting in his study, Rosa said. But perhaps the young lady would like to freshen up first. Sophia looked down at herself. She was still damp from the ocean. Salt had dried in her hair. Her clothes smelled like seaweed and fear. That's a wonderful idea. Valentina said, Rosa, could you draw a bath and maybe find some clothes that might fit? Of course. Sophia found herself following Rosa up that incredible staircase, her hand trailing along a banister smooth as silk. They walked down a hallway lined with more paintings and photographs. Happy families, wedding pictures, moments of joy captured forever. Rosa opened a door to reveal the most beautiful bathroom Sophia had ever seen. The bathtub was the size of a small swimming pool, surrounded by white marble and gold fixtures. Fluffy towels hung from heated racks, bottles of fancy soaps and shampoos lined glass shelves. Take as long as you need, Rosa said kindly. I'll find you something clean to wear. When Rosa left, Sophia stared at herself in the enormous mirror. She looked like a drowned rat. Her brown hair hung in tangles. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her lips were still slightly blue from the cold water. But around her neck, the lighthouse pendant caught the light and sparkled like a star. She filled the bathtub with water so hot it steamed. When she sank into it, every muscle in her body sighed with relief. The warmth soaked through her skin, chasing away the last of the ocean's chill. Sophia couldn't remember the last time she'd had a real bath. The group homes had showers with lukewarm water and time limits. Before that, the foster families had made her feel like a burden for using too much hot water. She stayed in that tub until her fingers wrinkled, washing her hair 3 times with shampoo that smelled like flowers. When she finally got out, Rosa had left a pile of clothes on the counter, soft jeans that fit perfectly, a sweater the color of cream that felt like wearing a cloud, new socks, even underwear that still had tags on it. Sophia stared at the clothes. They were nicer than anything she'd ever owned. How did you know my size? She called through the door. I raised 5 children, Rosa's voice came back. You learned to guess. When Sophia emerged from the bathroom, she found Rosa waiting with a hairbrush and a kind smile. Sit, Rosa said, gesturing to a chair by the window. Let me fix your hair. Sophia sat very still as Rosa gently worked the tangles from her hair. It had been so long since anyone had touched her with such care. Her throat tightened with emotions she didn't want to name. There, Rosa said finally. Beautiful. Sophia looked in the mirror again. The transformation was incredible. She looked like a different person. Clean, cared for. Almost like she belonged in a place like this. Now, Rosa said, are you ready to meet Mr. Benedetti? Sophia's stomach fluttered with nerves. She'd heard stories about men like Marco Benedetti, dangerous men, who solved problems with violence. But he was Valentina's husband, and Valentina had been nothing but kind. I'm ready, Sophia said, though her voice shook slightly. They walked back downstairs and through corridors lined with artwork that probably belonged in museums. Rosa stopped in front of heavy wooden doors carved with intricate designs. She knocked softly. Come in, said a deep voice from inside. Rosa opened the doors and Sophia stepped into Marco Benedetti's private study. The room was all dark wood and leather, filled with books from floor to ceiling. A fire crackled in a stone fireplace. Behind a massive desk sat a man who seemed to fill the entire space with his presence. Marco Benedetti was not what Sophia had expected. He was tall and broad-shouldered with salt and pepper hair and intelligent brown eyes. He wore a simple white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, no tie. He looked more like a college professor than a crime boss. But there was something in his eyes, a sharpness, a sense that he saw everything and forgot nothing. He stood when Sophia entered, which surprised her. Adults didn't usually stand for children. So he said, his voice carrying that same New York accent as Sal's. You're the little hero I've been hearing about. Sophia stayed close to the door, ready to run if she needed to. I'm not a hero. Marco smiled. It transformed his entire face, making him look younger and less intimidating. Just helped someone. He walked around the desk, moving slowly so he wouldn't frighten her. My wife tells me you dove into the ocean during a storm, that you broke a car window with your bare hands, that you dragged her to safety when she weighed twice what you do. He stopped a few feet away from Sophia. That sounds like hero work to me. Sophia looked at her feet. Anyone would have done the same thing. No, Marco said quietly. They wouldn't have. 20 people stood on that cliff and watched. 20 people with phones who called for help but didn't help themselves. Only you jumped in that water. He gestured to a leather chair in front of his desk. Please sit. We have things to discuss. Sophia perched on the edge of the chair, still ready to bolt. Marco sat across from her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. Tell me about yourself, Sophia. What's your story? Sophia's jaw tightened. Why does it matter? Because my wife is alive because of you. That makes you family. And family looks out for each other. I don't have a family. You do now. The words hung in the air between them. Sophia studied Marco's face, looking for lies or tricks. But his expression was serious, sincere. I don't understand, she said finally. Marco leaned back in his chair. In my world, there are rules, codes of honor that go back generations. One of the most important rules is this. You never forget a debt. And right now, I owe you a debt I can never repay. I don't want money, Sophia said quickly. I know. Valentina told me you refused the envelope. Marco's eyes crinkled with amusement. That tells me more about your character than anything else could. He stood and walked to a bookshelf, pulling down a leather-bound photo album. He opened it and showed Sophia the first page. It was a wedding picture. Marco in a black tuxedo, looking young and nervous. Valentina in a white dress, radiant with joy. We've been married 23 years, Marco said softly. She's been the light of my life since the day we met. Without her, he trailed off, his voice thick with emotion. Sophia looked at the picture, then up at Marco. For the first time, she saw past the intimidating exterior to the man underneath. A man who loved his wife more than anything in the world. The doctor said she was underwater for 9 minutes, Marco continued. They said brain damage was almost certain after that long. But she's perfect, completely fine because you got to her in time. He closed the album and looked directly at Sophia. You gave me back the most important thing in my world. How do I repay that? Sophia shifted uncomfortably. You don't have to repay anything. Yes, I do. It's who I am. Marco returned to his chair. So, I'm going to ask you again, and I want the truth this time. What's your story, Sophia? Where do you come from? Where are your parents? Sophia's hands clenched into fists in her lap. She'd been asked these questions 100 times by social workers, police officers, foster parents, but something about Marco's tone made her want to answer honestly. My mom died when I was 7, she said quietly. Cancer. I never knew my dad. After that, it was foster homes and group homes, and people who said they cared but didn't really. Marco's expression darkened. Someone hurt you. It wasn't a question. Sophia nodded, not trusting her voice. The last place was the worst. The man who ran it. Sophia swallowed hard. He had wandering hands, so I ran away 3 days ago. Marco's hands slowly curled into fists. When he spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. What was this man's name? Sophia looked up, startled by the change in his tone. Marco's eyes had gone cold as winter. This was the dangerous man she'd heard about in whispers. I don't want to cause trouble, she said quickly. What was his name? Harrison. His name was Harrison. Marco nodded once, filing the information away. Sophia had the feeling that Harrison's life had just become very complicated. You said you've been on your own for 3 days. Marco said, his voice gentling again. Where have you been sleeping? What have you been eating? Sophia told him about the bus stations, the garbage cans, the cold nights under bridges. Marco listened without interruption, his expression growing more troubled with every detail. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. That ends now, he said finally. What do you mean? Marco stood and walked to the window that looked out over his estate's gardens. I mean, you're not going back to any group home. You're not sleeping in bus stations or eating from garbage cans. You're staying here. Sophia's heart jumped. I can't do that. I'm nobody. I don't belong in a place like this. Marco turned back to her. You saved my wife's life. That makes you somebody. And Benedetti family takes care of each other. But what about the authorities? They'll be looking for me. Marco's smile was not entirely pleasant. Let me worry about the authorities. Sophia stared at him, trying to process what he was offering. A home, a family, safety. It seemed too good to be true. In her experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. She whispered, why would you do this for a stranger? Sophia looked into Marco Benedetti's eyes and saw something she'd never seen before in an adult. Complete sincerity. No hidden agenda. No lies waiting behind kind words. Because you're not a stranger, Marco said simply. Not anymore. You risked everything to save someone you'd never met. That tells me who you are inside, and that's the kind of person I want in my family. He walked back to his desk and picked up a framed photo. It showed him and Valentina at some kind of family gathering, surrounded by dozens of people laughing and embracing. This is what family looks like in my world, he said. Loyalty, protection, love that doesn't come with conditions. He set the photo down and looked at Sophia. I'm offering you something that can never be taken away. A place where you belong. People who will fight for you. A home. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. She'd been holding back for years. What if I disappoint you? What if I'm not worth saving? Marco knelt down in front of her chair, bringing himself to her. Eye level. Listen to me very carefully, Sophia. You dove into a freezing ocean to save a complete stranger. You stayed underwater for 9 minutes when your body was screaming for air. You performed CPR on someone twice your size until she breathed again. His voice grew fierce with conviction. You are worth everything. Sophia looked at this powerful man kneeling before her, offering her the one thing she'd given up hoping for. A real family, a real home, a chance to be more than just a survivor. She thought about the lighthouse pendant around her neck, about guiding ships safely to shore through the worst storms. Maybe it was time to let someone guide her home, too. Okay, she whispered. I'll stay. Marco Benedetti smiled and pulled the brave little girl who'd saved his wife into the first real hug she'd had in 4 years. And that's how a runaway child became the most protected person in the Benedetti crime family overnight. Sometimes the most unexpected heroes find the most unexpected homes. 6 months had passed since that storm-soaked night when everything changed. Sophia Benedetti, she could barely believe the name still, stood in the marble foyer adjusting her private school uniform. The lighthouse pendant gleamed against her navy blazer, a constant reminder of how far she'd traveled from those 3 terrifying days on the streets. The nightmares still came sometimes. Dreams of Harrison's wandering hands, of sinking cars, of being alone and forgotten. But when she woke, gasping in her princess bed with its silk canopy, Rosa was always there with warm milk and gentle words until the shadows faded. Marco had kept every promise. The authorities who came looking stopped asking questions after a single phone call. Harrison disappeared from the news entirely after his mysterious release from county jail, though Sophia noticed Marco's satisfied smile when the subject came up. She attended St. Catherine's Academy now, where the daughters of politicians and business leaders learned French and piano. The other girls whispered about her sometimes, this strange new student who appeared mid-semester with no history, but they whispered quietly. Everyone knew she belonged to Marco Benedetti. School was easy for Sophia in ways that surprised everyone. Not the academics, those had always come naturally, but reading people. She could tell when classmates were lying about homework, when teachers were having bad days, when the headmistress was nervous about parent conferences. Marco noticed her gift during family dinners when she'd mention offhand observations about his associates. The way Roberto touched his wedding ring when discussing his wife meant he was lying about something. How Carmen's laugh got higher when she was scared. These weren't things an 11-year-old should notice, but Sophia had learned to survive by watching faces, reading body language, understanding the truth people try to hide. Your eyes see what others miss, Marco told her one evening as they walked through the estate gardens. It's a valuable gift in our world. Sophia had asked what he meant by our world, but Marco only smiled and said she'd understand when she was ready. She was starting to understand already. The men who visited their home weren't businessmen, despite their expensive suits. They spoke in coded language about territories and respect and handling problems. She noticed how they deferred to Marco, how their voices dropped when discussing certain topics, how they never brought their families around. Valentina tried to shield her from the darker aspects of their life, enrolling her in ballet classes and art lessons, filling her days with the innocent activities of a normal childhood. But Sophia wasn't normal, had never been normal, and pretending otherwise felt like wearing clothes that didn't fit. She preferred the evenings when Marco included her in family discussions, when she could demonstrate her growing understanding of the complex relationships that governed their world. She was learning that loyalty was currency, that respect was power, that family meant everything. The first real test came on a Tuesday in October. Sophia was walking home from school when she noticed the black sedan following her. Not Marco's car, not any vehicle she recognized. Her hands tightened on her backpack straps as she quickened her pace, remembering Marco's lessons about situational awareness. Trust your instincts, he taught her. If something feels wrong, it probably is. The car slowed as she reached the estate gates, and through the tinted windows, she glimpsed a face she hoped never to see again. Harrison smiled at her through the glass, that same predatory smile from the children's home, before the sedan accelerated away. Sophia ran through the gates, past the gardens, into the house, where she found Marco in his study reviewing ledgers. The words tumbled out of her, about the car, about Harrison, about the sick feeling in her stomach that this wasn't over. Marco listened without interruption, his expression growing colder with each detail. When she finished, he made 3 phone calls, each conversation brief and conducted in Italian. Then he knelt down in front of her chair, taking her trembling hands in his steady ones. Harrison made a mistake coming here, he said quietly. He should have stayed disappeared. Nobody threatens my family, and walks away. That night, Sophia couldn't sleep. She stood at her bedroom window watching the shadows dance across the moonlit grounds, wondering what Marco meant, wondering if Harrison would come back. Around midnight, she saw movement near the gates. 3 cars arriving, men emerging, a brief conference under the security lights. Then silence. The next morning at breakfast, Marco seemed more relaxed than he'd been in days. Valentina hummed while arranging flowers. Rosa made Sophia's favorite pancakes shaped like butterflies. Nobody mentioned Harrison, and Sophia understood that some subjects didn't require discussion. The second test came a month later, more dangerous than the first. Sophia was becoming skilled at reading the undercurrents of Marco's business relationships, noticing tensions between families, understanding when partnerships were strained. She'd observed the growing hostility between the Benedettis and the Morettis, a rival family that controlled shipping through the southern ports. Marco tried to keep these conflicts away from home, but Sophia caught fragments of heated phone conversations, noticed the increase in security around the estate, felt the change in atmosphere when certain names were mentioned. The Morettis had been testing boundaries for months, small provocations designed to gauge Marco's responses. A shipment delayed here, a territory dispute there, nothing dramatic enough to justify open warfare, but enough to send a message. Sophia heard Sal discussing it with the other lieutenants one evening when she was supposed to be doing homework. They think Marco's gone soft, Sal said. Think having a wife and kid makes him weak. They're about to learn different. Sophia realized with a chill that she was the kid they were discussing, that her presence in the family was being seen as a vulnerability to exploit. The realization crystallized during Thanksgiving dinner. Extended family filled the dining room, cousins and uncles and longtime associates celebrating together as they had for decades. Sophia wore the emerald dress Valentina had chosen, her hair in elaborate braids Rosa had spent an hour perfecting. She felt proud to be part of this tradition, this gathering of people bound by loyalty and shared history. Then Marco's phone rang. The conversation was brief, his face darkening as he listened. When he hung up, the celebratory mood evaporated like smoke. There's been an incident, he announced to the room. The Morettis hit our warehouse on Pier 12. 3 men dead, $500,000 in merchandise destroyed. They left a message. Marco's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. They mentioned Sophia by name. Said they'd be in touch about terms for her safe return. The room erupted in angry voices, men pushing back from the table, hands moving toward concealed weapons. But Sophia felt strangely calm, as if she'd been preparing for this moment her entire life. She stood up, her small voice cutting through the chaos. They don't have me, she said simply. I'm right here. Marco looked at her with something like pride mixed with concern. That's the point, sweetheart. They're threatening to take you to force my hand. Traditional kidnapping would be too risky, but if they could grab you, they'd have leverage over everything I've built. Sophia nodded slowly, understanding the mathematics of fear. In their world, love was weakness unless you were strong enough to protect what you loved. She'd become Marco's vulnerability, but she could also become his strength. I want to help, she said quietly. I want to learn how to protect our family. The room fell silent. Valentina started to protest, but Marco held up a hand. What do you mean? He asked. Sophia looked around the table at these men who'd welcomed her, protected her, given her a home when she had nothing. I see things others don't. I know when people are lying, when they're scared, when they're planning something. You've all said so yourselves. What if that could be useful? What if I could learn to really help instead of just being someone you have to guard? Marco was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. She's 11 years old, Valentina said softly. Children shouldn't have to think about these things. Sophia turned to her adoptive mother, this beautiful woman who'd given her everything. I stopped being a normal child the day I dove into that ocean. You both know that. I've been shaped by violence and survival my whole life. At least here, with you, I can use those skills to protect people I love instead of just trying to survive alone. The truth of her words hung heavy in the room. Very well, Marco said finally. But we do this right. Professional training, proper precautions, and you follow every order without question. This isn't a game, Sophia. Once you step into this world completely, there's no going back to being just a little girl who goes to ballet class. Sophia nodded solemnly. I understand. And I choose this. I choose our family. I choose to be strong enough to help protect it. Marco smiled then, the expression transforming his stern features. Then tomorrow, your real education begins. The next morning brought a different kind of teacher to the estate. Elena Vasquez had been a federal agent for 15 years before personal tragedy drove her to private security work. Marco trusted her completely, which meant Sophia would learn from the best. Elena assessed her new student with professional detachment, noting quick reflexes, good spatial awareness, and most importantly, the kind of focused intelligence that could mean the difference between life and death in dangerous situations. Your mind is your greatest weapon, Elena told her during their first session. Physical skills matter, but reading situations, anticipating problems, staying calm under pressure, these are what will keep you alive. They started with observation exercises, learning to catalog details about people and environments in seconds. Sophia discovered she had a natural talent for remembering faces, voices, behavioral patterns. What took other students months to develop came to her in weeks. Meanwhile, the conflict with the Morettas escalated. Marco's responses were swift and proportional, designed to demonstrate strength without triggering all-out war. But Sophia could see the stress wearing on him, the way his shoulders tensed during phone calls, how he checked the security feeds more frequently. Valentina tried to maintain normalcy, continuing with charity events and social obligations. But Sophia noticed the additional bodyguards, the changed routes to familiar destinations, the careful screening of guest lists. The breaking point came 2 weeks before Christmas. Sophia was returning from her lesson with Elena, discussing advanced surveillance techniques, when they found the estate in lockdown. Security lights blazed across the grounds. Armed men patrolled the perimeter. Marco met them at the front door, his face grim. They took a shot at Valentina's car this afternoon, he said without preamble. Professional job, high-powered rifle, missed by inches. She's safe, but the message is clear. They're done with subtlety. Sophia felt ice form in her veins. Where is she? Upstairs, shaken but unharmed. Sophia, I need you to understand what this means. We're moving to a war footing. Full security protocols, limited movement, trusted associates only. And I need to know you can handle what comes next. Because if we're going to end this threat permanently, you might see things, hear things, that normal children shouldn't witness. Sophia met his gaze steadily. I told you before, I'm not a normal child. Whatever you need me to do, whatever I need to see, I can handle it. Our family is worth protecting, no matter the cost. That night, Sophia sat with Valentina in the master bedroom, holding her adoptive mother's hand while she slept fitfully. The elegant woman who'd given her a home, a name, a future, had come within inches of dying because of a conflict Sophia barely understood. But she was beginning to understand the responsibilities that came with being a Benedetti. Love meant protection. Protection required strength. And strength sometimes demanded terrible choices. Marco found her there at dawn, still keeping vigil. She's going to be fine, he said softly, settling into the chair beside her. The doctor checked her thoroughly. Just some cuts from the shattered glass, nothing serious. Sophia nodded but didn't release Valentina's hand. This is my fault, she whispered. They're targeting her to get to you, but they mentioned my name. This started because I became part of your family. Marco was quiet for a moment, then reached over to touch the lighthouse pendant she always wore. Do you remember what Valentina told you about lighthouses? He asked. That they guide ships safely to shore even in the worst storms. Sophia nodded. Well, sometimes storms try to tear down the lighthouse. Sometimes the waves crash harder when they see that steady light refusing to be extinguished. But do you know what happens to ships when the lighthouse goes dark? They crash on the rocks. They sink in the deep water. Everyone aboard dies. Sophia understood. You're saying our family is the lighthouse, and the Morettas are the storm trying to destroy it. Marco smiled grimly. I'm saying you are the lighthouse, Sophia. Your light, your strength, your refusal to be broken. That's what guides this family safely through dangerous waters. The Morettas think they can extinguish that light by threatening the people you love. They think fear will make you weak. They're about to learn how wrong they are. Over the next few days, preparation consumed the estate. Sophia continued her training with Elena while Marco coordinated with his most trusted associates. She learned advanced first aid, emergency protocols, and most importantly, how to stay invisible when violence erupted around her. The Morettis made their final mistake on December 23rd. Intelligence suggested they were planning a major operation, something designed to cripple Marco's organization permanently. The details were sketchy, but Sophia's newly trained instincts told her something was wrong when she noticed the unusual activity around the estate's perimeter. Cars that didn't belong. Faces she didn't recognize. The kind of subtle wrongness that might escape notice unless you knew what to look for. She found Marco in his study, surrounded by maps and photographs, planning defensive strategies with Sal and the other lieutenants. "They're already here," she said quietly. "The people you're preparing to fight. They're watching the house right now." The men looked at her skeptically until she described precisely what she'd observed, the license plates she'd memorized, the number of individuals she'd counted. Marco's expression hardened as he realized his 11-year-old daughter had detected a surveillance operation his experienced security team had missed. Within minutes, the estate transformed from peaceful family home to fortress under siege. But the Morettis had underestimated their opponents. They expected to catch the Benedettis off guard, to strike during a moment of holiday relaxation. Instead, they found themselves facing a coordinated defense that anticipated their every move. Sophia watched from the protected safe room as Marco's men neutralized the threat with professional efficiency. No shots fired, no violence necessary. Just swift, precise action that left the would-be attackers in police custody before they realized their operation had been compromised. The aftermath brought unexpected consequences. News of the failed attack spread quickly through the criminal underworld, carrying with it stories about Marco Benedetti's mysterious new asset. The little girl who could spot threats that seasoned professionals missed, who could read people like open books, who'd become the eyes and ears that made the Benedetti family untouchable. Other families began reaching out, requesting meetings, seeking alliances with an organization that had clearly evolved beyond their understanding. Christmas Eve found the family together in ways that would have been impossible weeks earlier. The immediate threat had passed, but more importantly, Sophia had proven herself worthy of the trust Marco had placed in her. She was no longer just a rescued child being protected by generous benefactors. She was a valued member of the family whose unique gifts made everyone safer. Valentina smiled as she watched Sophia help Rosa prepare the holiday feast, noting how naturally leadership came to someone so young. "You know what I realized," Valentina said to Marco as they observed their daughter directing the kitchen staff with gentle authority. She was never really a child who needed saving. She was always going to be a leader. We just gave her a family worthy of her strength. Marco nodded, remembering the 11-year-old who'd risked everything to save a stranger, who'd chosen courage over safety again and again. "The storm that brought Sophia into our lives didn't make her strong," he replied. "It just revealed the strength that was always there." That night, as snow began falling outside the estate windows, Sophia sat in the library reading while Marco handled the last business of the year. She'd grown 3 inches since joining the family, her face losing the gaunt desperation of a street child, filling out with good food and genuine happiness. But her eyes held depths that spoke of experiences far beyond her 12 years. She was becoming something unprecedented in their world, a bridge between innocence and knowledge, strength and compassion, tradition and evolution. The lighthouse pendant caught the firelight as she turned pages, that small symbol of guidance and hope that had become her talisman. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests of the family she'd chosen and that had chosen her in return. But tonight, surrounded by people who loved her, in a home that valued her contributions, Sophia Benedetti was exactly where she belonged. The runaway child had become the family's North Star, proof that sometimes the most unexpected heroes find the most extraordinary destinies. As the clock struck midnight, marking the beginning of Christmas Day, Marco entered the library and found Sophia asleep in her chair, book still open in her lap. He lifted her carefully, carrying her upstairs to the bedroom that had become truly hers, placing her gently under covers embroidered with lighthouse designs Valentina had commissioned specifically for her. This child who'd saved his wife had somehow saved his entire family. transforming them from a powerful organization into something richer and more meaningful. Outside, the snow continued falling, blanketing the estate in pristine white that would soon show the tracks of anyone approaching their sanctuary. But inside, three people who'd found each other against impossible odds slept peacefully, protected by bonds stronger than blood, united by choices that had transformed strangers into family. The little girl who'd written help on a napkin had become the author of her own extraordinary story, one that would echo through generations of Benedettis yet to be born. And in her dreams, Sophia stood once again on stormy rocks beside a churning ocean. But this time she wasn't alone and desperate. This time she wore the lighthouse pendant like a beacon, guiding not just herself, but everyone she loved safely to shore, no matter how fierce the storms that tried to tear them apart. Sometimes the most unexpected heroes don't just find homes. Sometimes they become the very foundation upon which new legacies are built.